welcome to EyeOpener, powered by Siemens. And now, please welcome your host, Gugan Sanger.
Yeah. It's just really interesting, isn't it? Just to explore a lot of these. I think the thing is as well, a lot of these terms, when it comes to predictive maintenance, can be overwhelming. And this links back to what I said before. Yeah. Because, condition monitoring, what is that? Predictive maintenance, what is that? But I think the bigger picture is that it is linked in a way because it's part of the process and the steps. We have predictive maintenance here, but you've got all of those little steps which you need to take and you need to work on processes and.
Well, actually, it's interesting you say that because one of the challenges we have sometimes is that when people think that predictive maintenance is over here, and their current approach is over here, and there's 7 steps, and there's the idea of world-class manufacturing that a lot of organisations look at. Predictive maintenance can be chunked in at any stage. It's not something you have to evolve towards.
Yeah,
you might have to change your practices a little bit, but not your culture. But it's not. It doesn't have to be seen as step 7 in a process.
Yeah. So I think touching on that point, like you mentioned, it isn't far away. I think it's just understanding that you can implement it and it can help and just make it easier. I think that's what the whole focus is. It just makes it easier so you can have your process in place. Yeah,
exactly. And you can use it as much or as little as you want. I mean, obviously, we think it's better to consider all the cases that are raised and involve it. But the point is, it's not raising work orders and setting an agenda on a daily basis that has to be adhered to. It's information that you can streamline into your current processes as gently as you wish.
Yep, of course. What would you say are the most biggest misconceptions when it comes to companies getting involved in predictive maintenance? Or, when it comes to implementing the solution that they need?
I think probably that falls into 2 categories. One is time, so people, how much they should be involved in the project. And the other is around data. So let's deal with them separately. So I think we'll have a frequent thing where companies will contact us and say, we're ready now. Can we do a predictive maintenance project? We've been collecting data for 3 years. We're good to go.
Yep.
And you kind of think, oh no, here we go. Because what the assumption they might have made is that this is a big data project or big data problem, really.
Fine.
That if you get as much information as you can about a thing, then you can infer as many things as you can. It's like measure the universe to predict everything. And there are a bunch of problems with that. Firstly, they've probably been measuring the wrong stuff because they didn't ask ahead of time. They've probably stored it in the wrong format, so it's going to have a load of reverse engineering. And thirdly, it's historical data. So the kind of things that we're looking at are not related to big data. But it's that kind of fascination with big data in the market is subsiding now. But for at least the last 10 years, a lot of people have been out there selling the idea that big data contains everything you need to successfully run marketing companies, thinking that if you know everything about the people that you're marketing to and if you could track their eyeballs across your poster and have that level of detail, it's big data, then you can crack every solution. And actually what we're looking at here is horrible little itty-bitty data. It's a sensor here, not one there, bit of data from a PLC, probably not the measures you'd most want, inconsistent maintenance reports. So it's not consistent, it's itty bitty, and we need to work with it to get a good solution out.
Yeah.
That's the truth, and that's what it'll be ongoing. So you have to cater for small data with human input. You can't throw about some data in a bucket and infer much about a machine. And the other aspect of that is this assumption that historical data contains everything you need, or that you need historical data to be able to build a model. There are some approaches to predictive maintenance that just say, right, let's look at what your failure modes are, and we'll sort of iron wrought some models that look for those failures. But that's very inflexible. That's sort of, you're looking at one slice of a pie of things that might happen. The vast majority of cases that we raise are things that have never happened before.
Yeah.
James, head of data, James, said to me the other day that he'd read in some book somewhere the nice statement that things that have never happened before happen all the time. And they're the things we're looking for. So if you try and model those on historical data, you will fail the vast majority of the time.
Yeah.
So this assumption that historical data is useful, or that it's the right data, or that you desperately need it, they're all incorrect. And I always feel like, oh, why didn't you call us or someone like us 3 years ago? Because we could have guided you on the process. It's much better if someone rings up and says, we want to do a predictive maintenance project. Are these the right things that we should be measuring? You know?
Yeah.
And then you can have a conversation around that stuff. And that's much more instructive and useful. So in terms of companies and their assumptions of what they look at, there's that data stuff. But there's also a lot of assumptions that people make around the people aspect and the involvement. And then that kind of weirdly goes in two directions. One is that they often don't want to have any personnel involved until the technology has proved itself.
Yeah.
Which is candidly an absolute nonsense. Right? How can you prove the whole solution is about people and usage? So if you don't have people in it, then what are you going to prove? But we've discussed that already.
Yeah,
that's back to this sort of issue of the isolated POC. But then there's a kind of this obverse challenge they have where they think that actually they're going to have these specialists who are going to have to learn an awful lot and probably maybe be a data scientist to have AI in their name. And of course that's also completely nonsense because as I was saying in my iPhone earlier, you don't need to understand how the product works. You need to know how to use it.
How to use it, yeah.
You don't need to do an oil change on it or lift the lid. You just need to know how to use it. So we do require a lot of people time from people in the project because it's a people solution. We're not going to let them stand and watch whilst we do a kind of magic trick because it doesn't benefit anybody.
Yeah.
But we're not asking people to come to the table and do things they've not done before, learn things that they didn't know how to do before. We're asking for their time and input because we need to know about their assets. We need to know about some stuff to do with their maintenance approaches and practices. We need to know about their IT infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. And we need them to be involved in understanding the cases that come out and going and doing something about them. So there's a sort of careful balance. So they'll know people need to be involved, but they might think it's for very different reasons and the reasons that there are. They'll sometimes want people not to be involved, and we need to explain why. So they're data and people.
Yeah. And I think from your perspective as well, the more information you have, the better.
Yes.
So, from their perspective of like investing into predictive maintenance solution, they've got all this information that they know about their assets and what's been going on and what's potentially been going wrong. And this is the maintenance team and this is our processes. So I guess, like you mentioned, and just touching on that point of investing the time, it needs to be equal.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because you're both working on something which is going to, like we touched on, make it easier. So the more information you have, the better it will be to actually understand what's going on.
Yes. Yeah. The more of the right kind of itty-bitty data.
Yeah, that's it.
As opposed to trunk loads of millisecond data about stuff that we don't care about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, one observation I consistently make about our slide deck, and I've done nothing to change, so I should take this as a moment to remember to do it. When we're explaining how specifically the Senseye technology works as opposed to a general any other predictive maintenance process, we talk about the first step, which is building a fingerprint of an asset. And that being a non-static fingerprint that can change over time, but that's your kind of baseline understanding of what is normal for that asset at that given moment in its life. And what we don't have in that slide is a picture of Chris or Rebecca or Jack or any of the rest of the team, because it is a people problem.
Yeah.
And you have this data that's available, but you do need a person who is well trained in these matters to make some decisions about how to format that data. And that doesn't have to be hugely time consuming.
Yeah.
But it will also, to your point, require some domain expertise from the client side. They need to match that energy.
Yeah.
They may not be long, complicated sprints in the project, but they do require people. It's not a black box that you plug in and
It does it all for you.
Yeah.
You need to have human interaction. I think that's what it is. Like we said, it's people to people.
Yeah.
So you need to have that as well as the solution, so you can all make sense of what's going on.
Yes, but I'd caution us not to put that under misconceptions, because I think actually that's just, you can't expect anyone to know much about your company until you've explained it. And we're now starting to talk about things which fall under the category of stuff a client wouldn't know, but you need to tell them.
So on our previous episode, we were joined by Niall Sullivan, and he had a question to ask our next guest on the show. And that question is, what motivates you to get up every day?
It's a great question. The main thing that motivates me to get up every day is not having to have a cigarette. Knowing that I can go to the kitchen, get a cup of coffee, go and sit in the lounge. I don't have to go outside and smoke a cigarette in the rain. I don't have to go down to the river where I used to go. And it is one of my first thoughts. So I gave up smoking just over 10 years ago, and I still am delighted by the fact that I don't have to get up and have a cigarette. So anybody out there who smokes, definitely invest time in giving up, because it's well worth it for that morning lack of nicotine.
I think that's a really great answer to the question that Niall asked, and it wasn't the answer that I was expecting, but very well done to you. So Nathaniel, if you could ask a question to our next guest on the show, what would it be?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so not knowing who's going to be next on the show, I'd say, given the rate of change of technology, and we talked earlier about jobs changing and how my career's changed, what do they want to do when they grow up, and why?
Thank you so much, Nathaniel, for joining me on today's episode. Really appreciate your insights into this topic around predictive maintenance and the misconceptions.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Perfect.
We'll do it again sometime.
Thank you to our audience for tuning in on today's episode. Please like and subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for the next one in the series.
To find out more, search Senseye Predictive Maintenance.